Hello there and a warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Judith. I'm your host and we are glad to have you join us on this edition. And the chat show, of course, comes to you on YouTube through our channel, Civic Space TV. And we do encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. We also encourage you to spread the word and feel free to share our content. Also follow us on our various social media platforms. That's X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and many others. So today on the chat show, our topic is the UPDF Parliament versus the people, the amendment debate. And I'm glad to be joined by my esteemed panelists from my immediate left, Dr. Robert Ojambo, a regular on the show. He's the head of the history department at Kyambogo University. Good afternoon, Dr. Ojambo.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Next to him is Dr. Bireete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Always a pleasure to have you join us, Dr. Bireete.
Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon, fellow panelists and viewers out there.
And then next to her is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator and UBC Ideologue. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I always look forward to coming to join, especially if Sarah is here, because I want to move Mwiri near to Berenyanji. But today I came, but Sarah is yellow.
And of course, the old boy from Tare, retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director for External Relations at the NRM. Always a pleasure having you join us.
Thank you so much. I really love to be here as well. I have a top management of the mighty NRM going on, but I escaped to come here. But as far as the Congress
That's
concerns
why you are in full regalia.
you can't move Baranyanya away from it's natural.
So just again, a background to you who is watching. Of course, I want to give context to the subject matter. As you all know, on Tuesday this week, that's May the 13th, 2025, the Ugandan Parliament held the very first reading of the UPDF Amendment Bill 2025. The bill was tabled before Parliament by Defense Minister Jacob Oboth. But 3 weeks ago, as you recall, here on this show, we talked about the UPDF Amendment Bill and we were asking whether or not Parliament will defy the Supreme Court. At that time, we had not yet read or received a copy of the proposed amendments. But now we have, and we've taken time to read. It is a 143-page document, and I must say, personally, I haven't really had enough time to exhaustively read through the text, but I have to some extent. But as you may recall, on January 31st, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered its judgment on the trial of civilians in military courts and the General Court Martial as unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court also went ahead and gave 8 recommendations to the executive and the legislature, which I believe that some of my panelists will most certainly touch on some of these recommendations as they make their submissions later on. But perhaps the biggest issue was certainly to amend some sections of the UPDF Act. And on Tuesday, Parliament began this process, as you all saw. And you might wonder why this law affects you as a person and why you should be bothered. So here is why. I'm just going to pick one of the provisions, but my panelists will expound on other areas. There's a provision for trying civilians under military law, and this is captured in a new section, that's 117A, which never existed in the old UPDF Act. And these are the categories of civilians who will be liable for trial under military law. Civilians who are voluntarily accompanying military units in active service, civilian contractors or those who have contractual terms with the army that subject them to military law, civilians found unlawfully possessing military arms, ammunition, or classified equipment, persons or civilians aiding or conspiring with members of the armed forces, individuals unlawfully possessing or wearing UPDF uniforms. This is just one of several issues in the 143-page document. And I think very quickly, I will just ask my panelists. I think I'll start with you, Dr. Bireete. That Parliament has now had the first reading of this bill. And I just want your initial reactions to this, especially considering the January 31st ruling of the Supreme Court. Your very quick thoughts when you scanned through the document. I don't know if you had enough time, you've had sufficient time to also go through it.
I have scanned through the proposed bill with about 74 clauses.
74, 80 something.
80 clauses, yeah. The object of the bill, or in simple English, the purpose of the bill, includes provisions like creating a medical board and the healthcare services for the servicemen, which is good. And they start with that good one. But the body of that object is the issue of military courts, the general court martial, the other courts, the military court martials that happen like in Karamoja, and then of course the contentious issue on the trial of civilians in court martial. The bill also touches on formalizing the new structure of UPDF, which is already under implementation without laying in Parliament the policy and regulations that govern that new structure, which is another big anomaly that, you know, I know the attention is on civil and political liberties, but the elephant in the room also is that structure and the excessive powers and control given to the CDF, including the issue where you see him, like how he was instigating violence in Kawempe, saying whoever beats Nupa will promote, and indeed he promoted. So he has those powers of temporary promotion then confirmed by the father. So also those are being formalized now. So this is basically the bill. But when you come to the objectives now, the bill also mentions the need to incorporate Supreme Court decisions. On face value, it's a legitimate issue because indeed, Supreme Court repealing sections 117 and 1191G created an overhaul. The decisions of Supreme Court, and I saw the Attorney General, you know, the other day saying something else. The decisions of Supreme Court confirmed the lower decision. The only clause that was saved on what the Constitutional Court had ruled is to say that UPDF courts can be subordinate courts with a chief magistrate level. If you read the majority decision by Justice Odochi, supported by 5 other judges. So the argument that the Attorney General advances and some other NRM people have seen is the argument of the 2 judges who deferred, saying if these courts are cleaned up with the professional people, then they can try civilians. Why do I call that an excuse of executive overreach? The principle of the doctrine of separation of powers vests judicial power in a separate arm of government. Executive power under Article 99 is vested in the hands of the President and the subsequent articles with his cabinet. The judicial power under Chapter 9 or from Article 126 is vested in a separate arm of government. Of course, Chapter 8 is Parliament, the legislative functions. But what you see is an attempt to create amnesia, you know, in the minds of Ugandans that executive power can also, you know, fit in the robes of judges, executive arm. Every institution of government, especially police has a police tribunal for disciplinary purposes. The summary of the decision of Odochi is that military courts can exist, but for service offenses, operational mistakes, operational missions and commissions, and misconduct of soldiers. Those are service offenses. That's the majority decision of that court. So when you go to the advisory orders, and they give about 45 alternatives. The first alternative in the advisory orders to executive and parliament on how to move forward, the first option was to create a military division of High Court to try the cases that interest the military. The way we have the War Crimes Division, Commercial Division, we have Criminal Sessions, family Division. So the first option is create a High Court Division for military cases. That's the first option. The second option is through, with the recommendation of Judicial Service Commission, recruit people who are qualified to be judges. That's being in practice for 10 years, legal practice. So whether they are soldiers or civilians, because that recommendation includes recruiting civilian judges for military courts. And then that recommendation has a clause, an underliner, that these judges who are now qualified can only try civilians in exceptional circumstances. They also put another underliner on that these exceptional circumstances must be presented to civil courts and present a condition that does not qualify civil courts to handle these cases. So that's what the order says as exceptional circumstances. In very simple English, in that judgment. The third option was to say that these courts, also with the professional people managing them, should then be at a level of chief magistrate level, and another option. So the fourth one is the amendment of Article 129 to make military courts part of courts of judicature, recognized under that article. So that they are then, because the Constitution is read as a whole. So when you put them in the Constitution, it means that they are bound by the principles of constitutionalism that govern all the other courts, that they are bound by the Trial and Indictments Act, the Judicial Code of Conduct, and everything that goes with courts as known. Of course, as I conclude, because I need to create space for the other colleagues, the most critical issues that court relied on in that decision were Article 28.1 on a right to a fair hearing, that goes with the protection of the independence and impartiality of judges, as well as safeguards for their jobs. So when it comes to the army works, it's a chain of command. And you don't question command. Even if your senior gives you a wrong order, unlike police where they say you can disobey an unlawful order, in the army you cannot. Order ni moja. So the courts are still embedded in that chain of command. The few cases where the defunct General Court Martial passed sentences, they had to consult with the president. So that means that the president wears robes of a chief justice when it comes to military courts as a chain of high command. So that is the biggest problem. The second biggest problem, as I conclude, is the function, how the courts function, the military versus civil. In civil courts, a criminal case is originated by a complainant who can be a civilian or a state agent if you've committed a crime, or an organization. So you originate a complaint by making a statement. Police then investigates. When police finds that there's a prima facie case, they take the file for legal advice to the DPP, who is the public prosecutor. If the DPP confirms that indeed there are elements of criminality with the ingredients of the offenses and evidence, they sanction the file. And then the file moves to court. But what happens in the military court? The army is the complainant. The army is the investigator. The army is the prosecutor, and the army is the judge. Like, what kind of nonsense is that really? I submit.
Thank you. Joseph, should I come to you or yeah, let me come to you, Dr. Ojambo. We're still talking about initial thoughts and reactions. When you scan through these proposed amendments, what comes to your mind?
You see, the biggest thing I've been dealing with in my mind is many people thinking that we're a democratic country. Once you are in that trap, then you will start talking about ideal issues of how this is supposed to be like that. I have convinced myself that I am out of that trap, and that's why most times I'm not worried, because I know what we are dealing with. And Africa, I was just telling Joseph before we came on this show, that Africa has been grappling with this issue for a very long time, since independence. We have never had a democratic country in Africa since independence. Because of our traditions, because of our colonial experience, because of so many things that happen, leaders who are not supposed to be even askaris end up to be presidents of a country, and it becomes a very big problem. So you have a government which cannot be described properly by political scientists to say that this is a democracy, this is an autocracy, this is a totalitarian or authoritarian. Is a mixture of things. Like, for example, Uganda has picked some elements of democracy, and that's why every 5 years we pretend to be electing, but in most cases we are selecting, and the other people are just entering office, in fact buying places into office. Then you have some totalitarianism. In most of African countries, the leaders have a military background. There is even a thinking among the local people that, can somebody lead these African countries if he's not a soldier? People wonder, because of the totalitarianism that the presidents show. Then there is aristocracy. In Uganda, I used to think that it will not arrive here. I used to think it was in Angola, in those countries where relatives and friends form a government, and nobody complains about it. You have a son, a mother, uncle, brother, in-law, friends, businessman. So they form a government, and the rest of us become their servants. You can do nothing, and somebody brags. Then there is also some I've already talked about aristocracy. And all these combine together and form a new mode of dictatorship. A new mode of dictatorship that is described, and many scholars who have gone to school of law, to school of political science, may not understand properly. Maybe we need to start generating these ideas. So we are talking about a complicated thing. A country where you don't have constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is defined by rule of law. In Uganda and many African countries, is ruled by law. Somebody gets hold of law and says, according to this law, according to this law. And that's why you see autocrats start being very good friends to the law. They want to use the law to legitimize their dictatorship. And that's where we are. Because there is no case in Uganda, I have said on this platform many times, there is no case in Uganda that cannot be tried by our judicial system today if it was rule of law. If it was rule of law, there is no case that they are talking about this halabaloo over here, Karamojong wrestlers, I don't know, people with the guns, I don't know what. There is no case in Uganda that cannot be tried by our judicial system. Because I've told you, Kwelo and his friend, the other guy, who were murdering people in northern Uganda, are in the High Court. They are being tried by the High Court of Uganda. Jamil Mukulu, they are there in the criminal and the other division, war crimes divisions, and they are there. They are sustained there. So, what is the hullabaloo about this new bill. The bill is a political tool of an autocrat. Is a political tool of an autocrat who wants to sort of oil his dictatorship by some rule of law. Because when you see this thing, you see that they are making a law that has eyes. A law should be blind. A law should be only applying to people who have broken it. But this one, you see, I want to give you an example. You know, I've been telling people that sometimes we need to sit down and just use a simple mind to think about things that are happening in this country. You saw when Kizza Besigye was taken to the court martial. A few weeks later, they attached a man on him that he had committed a crime with that man, a certain Kano. Now that Kano, I came to find out that the Kano was even picked from Luzira.
He was, as he had been in jail for 2 years.
Yes, he's there. He even a co-accused of another person whose case now is not moving because one of the person has been taken to the court martial. And now when you see the proposals in this bill, if you look at the proposals in this bill, that for you to sustain that section, I think 111 what, which is talking about trying civilians in the court martial.
It's 117A.
117A. They are saying that when you arrive there and you're Ojambo, you a civilian poor teacher, but you have been caught maybe with a gun in your boot, or you have been caught and suspected to be working with some military goons there, you are first given a rank in the army. Now, if you are like a bogus one like me, you will be given a rank of a private, so that you qualify now to be tried in that court. If you are a person who has retired like Major Awich, I'm sorry using his example, a retired officer of the army, they have also given them a rank. Now, don't you see that this is a premeditated thing, trying to look for some people? Now, having said that, the other problem with our country is that people are not sincere. And Sarah, I told you that for me, I was very skeptical about this Supreme Court ruling.
No, they did their job.
Where first the higher is suspected to have had a meeting with the president.
Ojambo, you keep on bashing me and Sarah on it. You're traumatizing us because Sarah and I were on that together.
No, I am not traumatizing you, and you should forgive me. It looked like this thing had been planned. For example, ever since that judgment was made, other than the main person who had appealed against that court, the rest of the guys have remained in jail. In fact, there is a big group that we are not even talking about. At least Besigye, they now moved him from the army court to the high court. But there is a huge number of NUP supporters.
And the Karamoja wrestlers.
Nothing. Up to today, we have not had any report about them. The Minister of Constitutional and whatever affairs promised that he was going to come with a report. Up to today has not come with that report. So they are now rushing this thing. And that's why you see the thing is being rushed as if there is a crisis going to happen. So that I will not be shocked when these guys are taken back to that court. These guys who the Supreme Court should have released, in my view. If the Supreme Court was supposed to do its work very well, should have released them. Because if you find something is not a bus and people are traveling in a bad thing, which is not a bus. I'm not talking about the movement bus. I'm talking about the Isuzu bus that we used to have here before the movement bus came and killed all of them. You tell them to get out of this dangerous bus. But the man gave an omnibus ruling, which has created a very big problem. I am glad. I am very, very glad that Parliament is going to challenge this thing. They are watering it down. And I want to tell you, as I said last time, The Parliament of Uganda that I know, once they give them their money and call them at State House for a movement caucus, they can amend the Bible and say Jesus was not a son of God. It was Muhammad who was a son of God. And therefore, from today henceforth, where they say Jesus, it will be Muhammad. Parliament of Uganda, may I know it. And it will pass very early in the morning. I can give you an example. There is this MP for Kagoma West, the assistant spokesman of the caucus, of the NRM caucus. That man, the day they started talking about this bill, I saw him on TV and he was swearing. He's a Catholic because he said it himself.
Kagoma North.
Chintu. Yes,
I
that
was with him last night. He's still in that same position.
So the man, let me tell you, this man was swearing. He was saying they cannot support here draconian rule. We cannot accept this. I will tell you, maybe you need to listen to him carefully. I heard him on CBS the other day, and he was saying that this bill is very nice. In fact, if you use it, and unfortunately he used a girl, that if you use the words in that bill to quote a girl, it will take you a few minutes. You will have won that girl. I said, look at this man. What's wrong? This is a honorable member of parliament. I am not sure whether he has even read the bill, because as you have said, the bill is voluminous.
It is.
80 clauses is not something small that you will understand in a few minutes and you start saying it is very good. Then I have watched a few committee interactions, and I have seen people who are just sugarcoating. You see them, including the likes of Katuntu and others. They are saying, now you know, creating some sort of debate, but saying in whole the thing is very good. In brief, what I'm trying to say is that in Uganda and in Africa as a whole, I think we need to struggle. And for us who are civic promoters, we need to struggle to try and help people to understand things so that they understand them and we fight for the right thing. Deceiving people that we are in a democracy, we shall be rotating in the same line. And knowing that we are not in a democracy, because in a country where now the military are the ones making certain decisions, and their decisions are final. The other day I saw the president called all the military commanders, and together they were vowing on how they are going to discipline, that the country has become immoral. The country now, people are just talking anything, and you need the military to put things to order. Now I was wondering, has the president and his team forgot the role of the military? If people are just quarreling amongst themselves and maybe not respecting elders, do you need the military? I thought you need elders, you need the church. If things go to criminality and some small thing, you need the police, not the military. But in a country where, you know, President Museveni, I like him so much. He thinks that if you have mosquitoes in a room, instead of using doom, you need to use a gun. So for him, normally, most problems of Africa can be solved by a gun. I have written a paper. I have written a paper on COVID-19 and trying to see how COVID-19 issues were dealt with in Uganda. The first thing he did, he declared it to be a war. It was a war. And for sure, people who were watching, it became a war. People were killed because they have been seen riding a motorcycle. Yeah. People were killed because they have been seen entering a shop. People were killed. And in Uganda, people look at that as a simple thing. We lost 2 people in Mukono who are going to work on a construction company. Young boys, that's riding on a boda, which has even been allowed. In Kasese, they killed a reverend. In so many places. So this, when somebody is talking about something, we need to take him very serious. A person who declares World Health Organization prescribed a very clear way of dealing with COVID. In Uganda, it was a war. In Rwanda, it was a war. In Senegal, it was a war. So this is a country where we think that everything can be resolved by the military. That's why some people are going to convince you here that you see these regular courts delay. You see, when you are dealing with a battalion like of cattle rustlers, you cannot take them to court. Those ones you need a military. These are lies.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ojambo. Joseph, still on your initial thoughts when you just scan through the text of this proposed legislation. What are the things that come to your mind first?
I think really, Sarah, having given the elaborate legal bite to the process and the broader meet by Dr. Ojambo, I will simply suggest that I will not delve into it, but simply talk about the broader spirit. But to do so, I want to say quickly that before all your camera people had been born in 1980, just as we'd gotten rid of a very terrible dictator, Idi Amin, that for the moment, true records, generally would possibly suggest that Amin's regime has been the worst in this country. But if you actually organized a public discourse on this program, and you invited 5,000 average Ugandans, possibly 1,000, in fact perhaps 100, a considered debate with a non-Afrobarometer research will easily found that Idi Amin is not the worst. It will easily found that NRA is the worst military regime this country has ever known. In 1980, as political parties were campaigning at the time, there were only four. Obviously, the mighty Uganda People's Congress, the NRA Troops Mighty, and Mass Party at the time. So things have got history, Uganda People's Congress and the Democratic Party as the principal political parties, and then come UPDF, political organization, and the Conservative Party. Parties were talking issues, the manifestos. The only thing that, for the purposes of the majority of your viewers, Mr. Museveni's position was that Uganda need to democratize the gun. So as Dr. Ojambo was talking, I had a mind switch. And thanks to the context on politics and memory in this country and this conversation, Mr. Museveni in 1980, as he was coming into the limelight of politics, his view was that this country needs to democratize the gun. And that was the most urgent thing post Idi Amin. It's not surprising that Comrade Museveni went to the bush and used the gun to come. The guy has used the gun to date, and you can see on Wednesday how in the National Assembly, I think even Thursday, how the National Assembly is surrounded by soldiers, and here we talk about an absolutely unnecessary conversation. Absolutely shouldn't be the kind of thing that is taking on our time. Dr. Ojambo, I want to dissuade you. Africa has got issues. Uganda has got issues. But I just want to reject the idea that it's impossible for us to have a democracy. Because to suggest so is to basically play into Mr. Museveni's hands and minds, and basically to make Ugandans, particularly young Ugandans, believe that no, there's nothing they can do because the government is in charge. Let's wait for the end of the world. No, I agree with you that most of Africa is substantially militaristic and substantially dictatorial. I agree that Uganda is being ruled by a military dictatorship now close to 40 years. But we've never had a democracy in this country, and we haven't had an attempt at democracy. And part of the core of the civics discourse is to try and push for the idea that we need to inculcate amongst in our minds the spirit and values of democracy. So it's actually possible. So it's not really necessarily an Africanist thing to line up dictatorship. But the fact that we're actually victims of NRA. I lived in a democracy in this country. Now, that said, how we've ended up in a situation in which we are actually discussing openly a possibility of formalizing the militarized polity as part of our constitutional arrangement. I can't fathom, except as I said, like I was telling a group of young people the other day, that, well, unfortunate things, this country is not going to change, and whatever discussion we have is not going to change until Mr. Museveni and his system, predominantly controlled by his family, genuinely somehow retires. And we just hope that they retire peacefully and be able to have a fresh conversation, national conversation, in which we're able to revisit our constitution, revisit our statutes, our books, and that an element of rule of law actually returns. If you see what happened to Kizza Besigye, and Besigye, Dr. Ojambo just reminded us that Besigye is still in prison, and that while Besigye is in prison, we've got hundreds of people who've actually disappeared, and hundreds of people who are being held incommunicado, and hundreds of people whom, leading legal minds like Sarah should consider, in an advisory capacity, how we take next steps to try and rescue these people, whom we are not able to talk about. It's unfortunate. So no, I don't know what my preliminary thoughts can be, except to say that, look, what we are discussing is a major monster in the middle of our household. But I think Ugandans need to know that it is possible for us to have something better than NRA, because we ever did have something better than NRA, and it's possible for us to have a democracy, and this country has ever had a democratic government, and that even if they're struggling, that, well, maybe you breached a major constitutional provision in dealing with a particular issue on a particular event on 1980, and the president or a parliament can come and say, we were trying to protect item A, B, C, D, and the circumstances of the breaches were A, B, C. And that happens in democracies, including actually the mother of democracies, which is basically my best example of democracy, which is the UK, that you find governments come in and put up their hands, say, we crossed the lines, and you find the judiciary coming and throwing things on the executive and on parliament, in this case the legislature, and things are changed and things are checked, meaning that men and women of brains beyond the army, are thinking about their countries and thinking about the process of going forward. Maybe I'm losing my mind on this, because I find it actually genuinely very, very sad that this is a conversation we're having today.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be moving to Major. I would also need your observations or your initial reactions to the proposed amendments. But as I give you a minute to reflect, I'll also come back to you three when he's done. I want us to also focus on the issue of the conduct that he raised, the conduct of our military officers, especially those of higher rank, in relation to these proposed amendments. And also, we also have to be alive to some of the developments that we saw or we see play out before and in the immediate aftermath of the first reading of this bill. Parliament being surrounded by, the heavy military deployment around Parliament a day after the bill, a day or two after the bill was read, and the very day of the reading, the notice that Parliament issued calling for individuals and different entities who wanted to share their views on this amendment, and just being given, I think, just a matter of hours, less than 24 hours, to actually go through this voluminous bill and file a memorandum. Yes, what this exactly means to all these liberties that we are talking about. But as you think about this, Major, I'll give you the microphone now.
Just to pick up on that, I don't know whether it's not there in the rules of Parliament if procedures are not set out. Because if procedures are set out, then we would...
The Parliament rules and regulations give 45 days of public participation. But the leadership is always like in a robotic mode to endorse executive bills.
So, Major, your observations on the bill.
Now, my views about this bill is that we should try as much as possible to adhere to the Supreme Court ruling. Now, if, like Sarah says, there are different readings to the Supreme Court ruling. For example, Sarah is saying, and I think sometime my colleague, the Director of Legal Affairs, tried to raise that kind of argument, that a certain judge said this.
They are quoting the dissenting judges. For every ruling, under which me and you know, it's the majority decision that carries the day.
So, if in trying to understand and follow the Supreme Court decision, minds are reading it separately, including maybe it is a matter of grammar. So if you went to a good school like in Tare, reading grammatical sentences shouldn't be a problem. Reading grammatical sentences shouldn't be. So I wonder how senior mind.
No wonder Mwiri thinks fundamentally differently. I see the issues here.
How senior minds can interpret the same decision differently. But the cure is that all the minds are in parliament. The lawyers like Tundu and Segona, they are there, and others. Therefore, we would think that since they convince us that they were the most competent in their constituencies, here is a test to see that you are there. That is a General Assembly. General Assembly in that, no, not General Assembly, National Assembly.
Yeah.
National Assembly is an assembly for the whole country, only that not all of us can go there, and therefore they are representing us. So let's see how the minds intercourse there. That is why we have a National Assembly. But it is good that it must crystallize into the position of the Supreme Court. Because as I said some time back, if it doesn't, then we're going to be running into a recurrent cycle of another litigation. So I don't know if we would not get embarrassed as a country if we pass it and somebody goes to court and court rules the same thing. So it will look like either we are not being honest or we simply don't have the intellectual capacity to understand. In which case, it's bad. Both situations is bad. Are you being dishonest or are you not understanding? Because if the same thing is done and taken to court and the court rules the same way, the both scenarios are hard. It's like one of Lucky Dube's songs who gives very hard scenarios. In one of his songs, he says, would you rather be a well-fed slave or a hungry free man? So either way, if you're a well-fed slave, it's also bad. If you're hungry free, it's also bad.
Yeah, but
so
a hungry free man is better.
So do you choose to be not intelligent enough to read, or do you choose to be dishonest? But all in all is that let the best minds who were selected or elected by their different constituencies do a national duty to the effect that the Supreme Court decision is respected. And for us in NRM, we know that we gave democracy to the people and the independence of Parliament, so we shall respect the decision of Parliament. The other thing is that I want somebody mention about a situation in the military where you hear orders of a commander. Now, in all international conventions that Uganda is a party to, including ICCPR or ICP, Civil and Political, Economic and Political Convention on the Rights of the Child, all these conventions against torture, and also which is domesticated in our laws, particularly in the Act of Parliament called Enforcement, Human Rights Enforcement Act. The law as it stands now provides that the defense of a superior command doesn't hold. In the past, there used to be a defense in law called a defense of superior command. Similarly, the law has waived out a defense of attorney general. For example, if you're a policeman, you go to work and you break somebody's leg, and when you're sued, you say, no, you sue attorney general, it is not me. That defense is now not tenable. Similarly, a defense of a superior command is not tenable. The law now provides that you will be responsible for your violations. And I like to say that this beautiful law, Congressman, is a law brought by NRM. And that shows the degree to which we are committed to human rights protection.
No,
Flower-
human rights
flower
enforcement
glitter,
act
yeah.
was a private member's bill.
But if we wanted to block it, we have
And then there's a different argument.
Yeah.
we would have blocked
We
it.
Yeah,
all
true.
supported it,
Yes.
yeah, but in effect.
We supported it.
Fair enough.
So nobody should now take the defense of a superior command to be a defense to use to violate human rights. So a defense of superior command, like a defense of attorney general, is not tenable in law. I also want to comment in view of this about Uganda being a democracy. Like we alluded above that we shall respect the decision of parliament. Is sure Dr. Yomi should not say that we're not a democracy, we are proper democracy.
When it's under siege by the army.
Power belongs to the people, and we want it exercised as such, and therefore there shouldn't be any worry. Now, on the element of rule of law, I have time and again said that the rule of law ideally is very much emphasized by the Americans, because Americans' cosmopolitan culture, various cultures needed something hanging above. But we really strongly believe in consensus building, which you would not really need the rule of law, but societies will understand. But being as it is now, sophisticated as it is, the rule of law shouldn't really, as somebody says, be ruled by law. And I don't think that is the spirit NRM wants it. NRM wants rule of law, not ruled by law. On the issues which is contentious in this bill, whether or not there are other cases, or all cases can be tried by civil courts. Ideally, Sarah knows that High Court has
Unlimited
powers
jurisdiction.
over all matters.
Yeah.
For example, suppose Kopolo Tumwesije shoots a wife in Umbuya Barrack. Would somebody say, because Kopolo Tumwesije has shot a wife dead in Umbuya, and therefore the courts of law cannot try? The courts of law can try. It's murder. It's just a matter of, you can actually call a police from Ginger Road to the Uniport in Umbuya, where this shooting took place.
No, you should.
And
Basically,
then
that's
the
the
police
idea.
will come to this Uniport, and the police will take scene of crime and everything, and Kopolo Tumwesije would be taken. And that is it. So, therefore, I'm just saying that there is no crime that a high court cannot have power, or the ordinary courts cannot have power. Now, in law, we have this principle that to every general rule there's an exception. I think Sarah said that the exceptions are well created, and therefore it should be such a demonstrable exception, very demonstrable, that it qualifies as an exception. Because I repeat, in law there's what we call it a general rule. For example, the general rule is that you don't go to court and say, Ojambo, I had. No, in law, you must have seen. But the exception, one of the exceptions to that, for example, is that a dying declaration. When somebody is in the other room, and if I'm with Sarah there,
You wish.
yes, I'm demonstrating the exception to
Okay.
the general rule.
Okay.
Admissibility of hearsay.
Okay.
I am saying, as a general rule, you should not go to court and tell Ojambo, I heard. Court doesn't want that.
No.
But the exception is if I'm with Sarah in the other room
Ah.
and you heard Sarah saying, I wish you are killing me. And you find Sarah in a pool of blood. Then
God forbid.
that
The
would-
threshold.
Dying declaration.
that be a dying declaration. But of course,
God
Sarah can
forbid.
say, I wish you are killing me.
Amen. So yeah, we cancel. We cancel.
It's not there. So, now, if this exception of saying that courts have power to call, the criminal justice system should flow in a way that Corporal Tumwesi has shot a wife in Ombuya, you go to Ginger Road Police, bring police, follow this matter, have Corporal Tumwesi tried in the normal courts of law is possible. What degree is this exceptional? And therefore, again, I think I will bank on the ability of our members in the National Assembly to sieve this through in view with the Constitutional Court position. But I want to emphasize that High Court has power over all matters, including a death which has occurred inside the barracks.
Yes.
A death which has occurred by a Corporal Tumwesi shooting his wife in a uniport in the barracks. The court has that power. And the police will pick up. The army will simply say, here is the Corporal Tumwesi. So I see that possible. Now, as to this exception that is being, I pray that the minds of our members whom we duly elected from Kotido, from Kisoro, from Bushenyi, who are really, we thought were our best, will now see in view with the guidance given by the Supreme Court. We therefore look upon Parliament, as we said, and for us as NRM, we think we have given our best cadres. Even now we're in the process of going through primary. We have a very rigorous primary election. We therefore hope that whoever will give a flag and whoever goes to Parliament is competent enough to debate matters of national importance and will do a good job.
Okay.
So we expect the best.
Thank you. I'm told it's time for us to take a break. Time really runs on this show. So let's take a break and then we return and continue with this discussion on the UPDF, Parliament versus the people, the amendment debate. That's after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show as we continue with our discussion on the topic, the UPDF, Parliament versus the people, the amendment debate. And in this hour now, I will turn my focus to the three of you, and I would like you to address the questions that I had posed earlier. But before we do that, I want to read this amendment, the proposed amendment, on I think page 3, also number 3. It's titled Remedies Proposed in the Bill, and there are about 11 of them. But I'm going to pick just one, and I would like your legal interpretation, because it also helps us address the other questions that I would like to pose to you. So J on the remedies, it's A up to K. So J is that one of the remedies is to establish a disciplinary unit within the defense forces which shall be responsible for the discipline of the members of the military courts department. Okay? I'm not a lawyer, so but when I read this, I don't quite get the clarity here. Does it mean the discipline is only for members of the military courts department? What about the other members of the military, including the high-ranking officials in the army?
So, Judith, what that means in simple terms, and I want to refer fellow panelists and viewers out there to the gist of the Supreme Court decision. The reasons that led for the repeal of provisions creating the military courts in that decision were lack of independence, lack of impartiality, and lack of safeguards that protect judges, magistrates, judicial officers on security of tenure and other threats. So the Constitution under Chapter 9, judicial power provisions, Article 128, others, protect judges to dispense or administer justice without fear or favor or control of anyone. But the military courts are under control, chain of command. I don't know what the smallest units are called. Each unit has a leader you don't question. That's why they say Oda and Moja. So if, like the issue of Besige, when he was still in a court martial with his friend, Abed co-accused. So when the CDF started tweeting, we are going to kill that one. It's a death sentence. Even I have a tree where I'm going to hang them. Meaning, they had already decided, because the CDF is part of the Army High Command. So meaning that then, in that doctrine that they are trying to create, however much professional, because they are going now to deploy their lawyers in the Army court, however much legal knowledge you have, they don't want you to apply that legal knowledge. They want you to do what you are told under the usual command of the army. And this is what makes them unconstitutional. Because the safeguards that enable people who are brought before these courts a right to a fair trial do not exist. That was the gist of that ruling. So when you see those elements, and we have been saying the executive is reenacting repealing sections, but hiding under smart English.
That's correct.
And they've been dodging. But that's what it is. And to remind viewers that Article 92 of the Constitution prohibits Parliament
That's correct.
from reenacting any law that contradicts a decision of court. In this, they've done it before. When Section 23 of the Police Act was repealed under the Mwanga Chivumbi petition versus Attorney General, the NRM regime reintroduced Section 8 of POMA that has now also been repealed. So it has happened before, and Afanda, which was expressing the frustration of waste of time or money. Let me tell you, reenacting repealed sections wastes taxpayers' money in 4 forms. One is the money executive spends, like the judicial officers now in Attorney General's chambers, the Parliament, Legislative Council, to reenact and coach these sections, to reintroduce something declared unconstitutional. That's taxpayers' money. The time Attorney General is using and the movements is taxpayers' money. The sittings of Parliament is taxpayers' money. The sittings of court is taxpayers' money. So those are 4 forms of taxpayers' money spent to do something legally bogus. Then the citizens like us who do public interest litigation will be required to spend our own money, yet we are paying tax.
That's correct.
For the bogus actions. To go to court and repeal the same bogus things they are doing. It's really, and I hope citizens understand the pain we are in And we are going into elections. I don't understand. You know me, I am pro-protest vote. This regime has nothing good to offer. Me, I am for the protest vote. Turn out and vote. Anybody not in yellow. I don't care whether it's red, blue, whatever. Vote out yellow. And we solve this problem.
Major.
I knew which day was going to
just read
protest.
the provision.
Yeah, the provision.
Read it, yeah, read
I
it
read it
again.
again. Just a second. Just a second.
Read it again.
You have
Let me-
declared.
let me
Yes,
open
I'm
it
for the
once more.
protest.
So this is
The
what
good
it
thing we
says.
also have votes.
Remedies, it's under remedies proposed. So that is J. It's A up to K. So J says to establish a disciplinary unit within the Defense Forces, which shall be responsible for the discipline of the members of the Military Courts Department.
Now in the army, not in the court
Within
system.
them.
So is that intended to discipline courts?
Court officials.
That is what I would like to know.
In fact, my initial sorry.
Go ahead.
No, my initial thought actually was that possibly it's an equivalent of the Judicial Service Commission equivalent in terms of discipline of the military.
No.
But that was my original. But anyway,
No.
carry on.
You
Yes,
see,
Major.
you see, ideally, just to come in
Sorry,
before he
yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Ideally, when you say people who will preside over military courts will be on the advice of Judicial Service Commission, then they would be subject also to disciplinary of Judicial
Judicial
Service
Service
Commission.
Commission.
But you see, it's not the case.
Okay, then that then in which case
Okay.
nullifies the
Hearing
argument of
that
thought.
Yeah.
is just, you would subject it to rules of interpretation. There's a rule saying the mischief rule. What is it intended to cure? But I think this one applies under the literal rule, just the grammatical understanding of that thing. It is a literal rule. You can use the literal rule to define, to interpret that. I think if you read it, the grammatical, the ordinary language reading is that there will be put in place a body that will be an overseer of overseer. There's a court going on, and then it will display. Like court inspectors, kind of. Is that what is intended to do?
Disciplinary committee.
For the courts.
For the heads of courts.
Yes.
But that is also, some people may argue that it would mean, like, for example, if you take, for example, the case of when court martial was working, if you ruled in what you think you have ruled, and like you are concerned about a superior power deems that you have not, then you'll feel that the other body will come hard on you.
Of course,
Why
that
did you
means
rule it like
to
that?
ensure that you rule according to the orders you are given, not according to judicial principles.
Anyway, the grammatical understanding I have there is that that body which is being proposed will oversee the various courts. For example, you have courts starting from unit disciplinary committee. And then you have a brigade court martial. And then you have a division court martial. Then you have a general court martial in Makinde. Then an appellate court, which is also appeal court martial. Now, if the intention is to have that standalone unit to oversee all this, or even that standalone body to oversee, even if it was at unit, maybe if the intention was to say every battalion, which is a unit, have court martials, so this independent body will oversee the discipline of those, the court of first
Preside
battalion,
Discipline and
officers.
operations.
the
Yes.
court of first battalion, the court of second battalion, the court of third battalion.
Okay.
If you may allow me a question, Afanda Awich, what problem are we supposed to solve? What is the
mischief?
rigor lacuna
Precisely.
in this
What he
situation?
calls the mischief.
What is the
What's the
mischief?
mischief?
I think the original mischief was that people who commit crimes that are predominantly military related should be handled in the military justice system.
What are military
For example, that is why it was qualified like cattle rustling. A battalion of people going to rustle should be that. And that's why they're saying if you are with a soldier and you are going to commit that crime with a gun, then you should be within the armpit. So the mischief intended here is military. And now, how do we define that military-like actions, those offenses? I think the clear example of the military-like offenses is a brigade of Karamojong coming to Teso to raid, or a brigade of Karamojong coming to Lango to raid. So that was the mischief, or that is the mischief, to ensure quicker criminal justice for military-like kind of crimes.
Anyway, Judith, for me, I'm not interpreting the law, but just listening to what you read there, it is just to keep an eye on this court. That committee is supposed to keep an eye on this court to make sure that whatever is intended, what I said, rule by law, to make sure that the rule by law is achieved. Because who defined the discipline? What is in discipline in this court? As Sarah said, if they want the thing to appear in the court system, there is a Judicial Service Commission, which disciplines judicial officers of any court in this country. And they have codes of conduct, which they depend on. Now, supposing I have been told by Commander X to judge or to understand a case in the different way, and he accused, I don't do it, and he takes me to that thing. Will I survive? No. So I want to assure you that militarization of everything in our country is going to be very, very dangerous. So for us teachers, very soon we shall also ask that when we are going to class, they should give us a gun, and we shoot those who don't understand what we are teaching. Because let me assure you that as Comrade Awich said, that the High Court of Uganda has capacity. These judges who are deployed in this court have ability to deal with any issue. And he gave an example of somebody being picked from a barracks at Mbuya. But for me, even going further, even somebody who forms atrocities in an illegal war in the north, in Bundibujo, anywhere, if he is taken to that court, there is a charge that he will get either treason or murder or aggravated robbery, depending on what. And the court is able to do that. So what is the mischief? Let me today also use Comrade Awich's words.
He's excited.
The mischief is...
Soon you're going to Chankwanzi.
The mischief is that these courts of yours, number one, they delay. Number two, they may not rule in a patriotic way. That's what I've heard from the head of state. They may not rule in a patriotic way. For example, they give bail to criminals, to killers, to people who are anti-state. And yet the president and the powers be are against bail. So when they take you to the other draconian thing, it will not give you bail. When the commander-in-chief has said there is no bail, it will not give you. Because you remember when the president talked about police bonds in these places where people are being given police bonds, he was answered in appropriate and he kept quiet. He has never talked about them again. Because police bonds are clearly stated on circumstances through which you can get a police bond, especially when they cannot present you to the court of law in 48 hours. They don't have evidence. Now, these other guys who have been teaching people Unyankore, for them, they don't care about that provision. They can take you under the basement, cane you for a whole week, remove your teeth and cut your hair, then they present you to court anytime they want. The police does not have that responsibility. For you have not seen how the military is going to take away the policing work in the country and so many things. So they want, if for example, they take that matter to court X, be it court martial or brigade court or which type of court, and somebody does not act in accordance to the expectation of the high command, you go to that disciplinary committee and you will be punished. And therefore, you are going to get very unserious judgments. Oh, people who are observing, me, I'm not a lawyer, Sarah, but I was observing the trial against Vesige and his co-accused Obed.
You remember Joe went there?
Yes,
And,
you cannot go there for me.
I did, and I witnessed
Now,
atrocities
this
against the
man
lawyer.
who is supposed to be guiding the you call them
Judge
what?
advocate.
The judge
So
advocate
no.
was the one who was almost like the head of the
Presiding
court.
over.
He was
Sorry,
the
yeah,
one
yeah,
even
sorry,
telling
yeah.
the other man, he tells the other man that you made a judgment. The chairman says, I have not yet made the judgment. And the man produces some writings.
It was really respectable.
Yeah, it was a funny thing.
Comic.
So you can imagine. So you can imagine. You can imagine in such circumstances, you are that chairman who is. They are telling you there is already a judgment, and you are saying there is no judgment. They will take you to that disciplinary court.
So, I want us, Joseph, you wanted to say something, just in a minute or two.
No, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
I have been wondering, guys, earlier, you saw me sort of like struggling at the beginning. Partly, I just want to tell you guys genuinely that we thought we had actually discussed this matter exhaustively. Number two, Dr. Ojambo, I put up my hands once again, and on behalf of Sarah too, that we actually thought we had crossed some kind of a bridge of sorts with this with the ruling. And actually that we are here tells you how messy the state of this country is. But we must continuously seek to give hope.
The protest vote.
Process of this.
So,
Yeah,
you had asked a question.
No. I am coming.
If you don't mind, let me just conclude.
Yeah. Yes.
So that. But then number two, I was struggling with heart and pain, and sometimes absence of word. But also number three, today is one of those days when I really feel Ugandan, and so I really wanted to make sure that I had a Ugandan tea. And by the way, that's a cup of Ugandan tea, so it was waiting. So I was a little bit hungry, so it was that. But finally, there is this business that you raised. What is the lacuna? We discussed the music. We discussed this thing exhaustively. To shockingly, that elections are coming, and that's why Sarah's point about protest vote is important. I actually thought that legislators might fear to take this position. And right now, there is nobody making the argument, because the argument about the lacuna thing is basically what we discussed exhaustively, including the torture of Karamojong people. But there's a final point I want to make, lest you forget. Had it been that this provision was in existence under Obote II administration, when this NRA bandits were in the bush, 90% technically of Buganda, just food for thought, would have been subjected to this military criminality. Possibly 95% of DP would have been
If a joke was sending the kind of tweets the CDF.
But you see,
this is my point.
I want
that
Joseph
is
to
extremely
wind up.
important, and I think that it must enter the minds of Ugandans.
Okay.
That's how terribly bad it is, the argument being made.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
So I'm
see,
going
Joseph,
to take
maybe
us
before you take us,
1 minute.
I just want
Dr.
to ask
Ojambo.
you a question. You have read the law where they were giving examples. Is it true that they have given an example of cattle rustling in
Oh, yeah, of course they
Karamoja?
did.
Yes.
There is somewhere.
And
There is
they are
somewhere
going to
in the
legislate that?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is
Oh,
somewhere.
yes.
When you read,
I wish we mobilized these Karamoja.
I think
Well,
that's
that's where I was going.
117A. That's
Because-
117A.
But
When
they
you put,
will,
Because
actually,
cattle rustling is not synonymous
it's-
with the
it's in
Karamoja.
the
So
bill.
let me give you,
not.
let me give you some bad news.
Yes.
The two MPs in the committee that supported the proposal when the Attorney General and the generals were appearing were both Karamojong.
Yeah, those ones are
I think
misled
the region
because you
runs
cannot
leadership.
legislate against your community.
Either
Cattle
that's-
rustling can never be a Karamojong
so
thing.
close-
they should
close
delete
party
Karamoja.
under
Should be deleted
117A talks about that. You'll find it there. So I want us to talk about the issues I raised earlier. Now, on the morning of 13th, Tuesday, when Parliament did the first reading of the UPDF amendment bill, Parliament published in the New Vision an invitation to submit views on the Uganda People's Defence Forces Amendment Bill 2025. And it says members of the public who wish to appear before the Committee on Defence should submit written memoranda on the bill, because you submit it to the Office of the Clerk to Parliament, not later than Wednesday, 14th May 2025. So this came out in the morning. A lot of people actually missed, did not actually see this. That was 14th Tuesday. Remember, the reading was done on Tuesday afternoon. And individuals and civil society had to submit within such a short time, go through 143 or 150 pages. Then on Thursday, 2 days after this reading, we saw lots of barricades around the Parliament roads, and I'll just read a tweet from a post from the Daily Monitor X handle. It says, the caption to the photos was, a section of MPs has expressed concern over the inconvenience caused by blocked and restricted access roads to Parliament. Although the reason for the heightened security remains unclear, the MPs say the measures are creating an atmosphere of tension and unease. And back to the issue of discipline in the military, which you highlighted earlier, which we've also talked about. Again, when you go to the X handle of the CDF, he framed this release order that was issued by the Uganda Human Rights Commission in regards to the release of Eddie Mutwe, which we talked about last week. And his response was that, lol, if these people, that's the Human Rights Commission, value the lives we gave them, they must never even think of sending me such a stupid letter again. This is their last warning. I expect an apology. I'm not going to read the whole letter. You can find it online. And also, remember, a delegation from the European Union recently visited the NUP team at their headquarters in Kavule. And the photos, of course, have been all over the place. It made news. And the CDF again tweeted or posted on X saying, this is an abomination. And he tagged the EU and Uganda handle. I say, EU and Uganda is really playing with fire. Sour. Now, these are things that I want us to talk about. But shortly after, I'll ask you to just go to your WhatsApp right now in our group. But postpone the laughter for later, because I saw our colleague Philip just shared a cartoon drawn by Spire in which he has all these EU officials and he says rehearsals for the basement. You will just take a look very quickly. We can laugh about that later, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It looks funny, but certainly there's a very loaded message behind that.
But for me, I need a translation because it seems to be like in Runyankore.
Yes, Sarah will.
Let me see, my phone is there.
Sarah, I'll help you with mine. I'll help you with mine. Just look very quickly at that picture down.
I like this last one. I like that one.
And the sharp
Got it.
Okay. So guys, we're just laughing at a cartoon that was drawn by Dr. Spire. The cartoon.
Yes, so maybe if I may start with the satire of Dr. Spire. You know, in the East African integration agenda, we are struggling with the Kiswahili as a country. And whenever I go to Kenya or Tanzania, the last meeting I went for in Kenya, 80% was in Kiswahili. And you don't know how to ask for interpreters. You don't know, because Kiswahili is a working language.
Yes, it is.
And it's so normalized that you look silly.
Yeah, but 95% of Ugandans don't know Kiswahili. Because Kiswahili was a language of torture and abuse and degradation of people's human dignity during the past regimes. Pandagari, ingia hapa, toka, yes. So, whenever you speak of the language, that's what comes to our mind. And guess what the replacement is now? My own language. So my own language is taking that element.
What's your language?
Rujunyankole.
Okay.
The basement language.
Yes, the basement language of torture. Of torture under NRM junta. We are teaching him Runyankole. We shall reshape your noses. They forget that some of us Runyankole have very broad noses.
I also saw
You're
that
so
cartoon.
fantastic,
I also
actually,
saw that
Sarah.
cartoon that Spire did where it said people are now lining up for reconstructive no surgery. I said, poor Sarah. What is
No, you know, one day,
Surgery.
yeah, one day it might save me. Because during Uganda riots, also I had my friend from the east. He was very brown, like a Mnyarwanda.
with a shop.
Yes, he really is. These baggies, you know, they look.
Yeah,
you know, we
yeah,
are the same
yeah.
people.
No,
yeah.
Even if you
So
go deep and
these
you
baggies
find
who are very light skinned. The man was a commissioner at the office of Prime Minister. His head was burst into two.
Oh, dear.
Because they thought the writers thought he was a Mnyarwanda.
Babi.
so I
So the language of torture that has replaced Pandagari, India, Apatoka, Vijua, Gato, whatever, is now in Nyankore. Very unfortunate. And I hope that fellow Nyankore like me are so saddened. And our children and grandchildren might never speak Nyankore. The same way we don't know Kiswahili. Because it's a language of torture. But coming back to the broader questions, the conduct of the CDF, and we've discussed it several times. You know, for me, I've moved away from worrying about the CDF to worrying about the Commander-in-Chief. Because, and I want the viewers out there to understand my cause for worry. The only appointments that are not subject to approval of Parliament are military appointments. Police IGP comes to Parliament for approval. Commissioner comes to Parliament for, so you can collectively blame the executive and the legislature. Judiciary judges walk to Parliament for approval. I don't know whether these judges in kangaroo courts they are recreating will also go for approval. But the army, the president can, that's why his son is the CTF. There is no checks and balances in the army. And now the son is promoting people based on touch. If you beat Nupu promotion, if you do what, you will see how they are going to really butcher people in elections. So why have I stopped worrying about the CDF? I think there could be something wrong with the Commander-in-Chief. Because I don't think that he is the only citizen, although he's the #1 citizen and fountain of honor. I don't think that he's the only citizen if he is aware of the conduct of the CDF, who should sit comfortably and carry on as if he's governing the country well. He has functions to do. I know that Articles 102 on qualification for office have an aspect of mental capacity, and Article 107 on grounds for removal of office also have a component of mental capacity. I hope we shall not be pushed to check these safeguards in the Constitution because of father-son conduct.
Thank you. Just Dr. Ojambo.
Judith, you have asked a number of questions. Me, I want to start from Parliament. You see, when the Speaker was sending this bill to the committee, she made a rider that Macu, this bill is very straightforward. Don't waste a lot of time.
The Speaker
said. And that means by Tuesday, this bill may go for second reading. In the morning and in the afternoon, third reading, and in the evening, it will be passed to be implemented on Wednesday.
It wouldn't be surprising underneath.
Next week. As I said, this is a bill that is being prepared to haunt some people. And those people already, they have a list of people who have been presumed to have committed the crime. And they want a law to start haunting them. Then the soldiers on Parliament, I think that's a normal thing now in Uganda. As I told you, once you think that even houseflies should be killed using a bazooka, or bazooka is this big gun
Japanese
which
thing.
is used to hammer planes and big objects. You will think that even passing something like this, with MPs, why do you waste time with these characters? Just call them at the movement secretariat or wherever and give them their thing. They are going to approve this bill at the time you want them to do. But you see, you have to put a situation of fear, because now we have to fear. And you know, the thing NRM forgets is that very soon people are going to be used to this kind of soldiers. Because like now in Kyambogo, we have been with the soldiers there for close to 10 years, because they come
what?
there. There is a detached there. So sometimes he even forgets his gun. He forgets his gun there, and you tell him, Afande, umewacha silaha hapo. And he bebas the thing and goes away. Because we are going to get used to them. Before you know, soldiers will be staying with us in the home. Before you know, we shall know how to deal with them. And for me, I'm seeing light in the future. Then, you have talked about the human rights thing and what have you. In fact, I was surprised when that woman wrote that letter. I was really surprised. I said, where did this one get the guts?
By Uganda Human Rights Commission.
Yes,
It was very good.
yeah. I was really surprised. Unfortunately, I have not had a lot of kudos being given to her from different.
I have done.
If she had not written, she would have been bashed by
yes.
so
I
many
have
people.
done, and many people
So
did on
have I,
social
yes.
media.
Okay,
Yes.
but I have not seen so many, and I want to say that was courageous. That was courageous. But as you know, unless we are really now degenerated into a collapsed society, the Human Rights Commission is a powerful body in our country. Only that we have not yet gotten somebody who can put it, you know, like rally cars are always the same. They have the same power, but you have to get a good driver, Wakataka, or Cheaper Adam. We used to call him the corner specialists. Or you get,
The son of Civic.
or to get, this one was just trying. I'm talking about guy, Ochitaguro, may his soul rest in peace, to show you that this vehicle can really run. So what we lack in Uganda in these institutions is leadership. For example, now the human rights should show us, from now writing to him, and with that ridiculous letter,
response,
should now summon him. And we see whether he will not go. And if he does not go, then we know that now this is a different type of government. Finally, you have talked about the threatening and beating of people and so many other things in many areas, and the behavior of Muhoozi Kainerugaba. I don't want to call him
Including threats on international.
Yes, because I don't
the
want
EU,
to call him
which is- yes.
CDF, because CDFs are not supposed to behave like that. I thought army is a place of discipline. And by the time somebody reaches a general, I really normally imagine, if it was in our area, that is a professor. That is a person who has seen it all. If discipline, he's 100% or 110. If it is understanding international relations, is 110%. In this case, I think we have the wrong person in the right office. A CDF can never be antagonistic with diplomatic corps. In any case, I have not seen any. He is supposed, what does he want even there? What does he want there? These are not military people. What does he want there? But I have always told my colleagues who want to go in politics that you will have to buy a military gear. The next election is going to be dangerous. It is going to be horrendous. With this man as a CDF, the other time he was just an advisor to the president in 2021. And so many bodies fell in Kampala. Now you can imagine when he's the CDF, with the power, with the false confidence, where he even thinks that is Jesus Christ and his father is God and the mother is Mary. We are really in big trouble. Me, I think the trouble with the Uganda is that institutions have collapsed. We have a military council, we have a high command, we have all these bodies which are supposed to be disciplining their officers. they cannot say anything. Maybe when they are doing so, it is so silent. Why don't the newspapers and other people try to tell us that something is happening? Otherwise, we are getting a lot of worried. People think that what is happening in Sudan is very far from us. In Sudan, we have military warriors who have formed military groups and have taken over government. That's why we have 5 vice presidents. And each of them is leading a military cocoon somewhere, which is tribal. Somebody thinks that in Uganda it is not possible. It is very possible. And it will be a bad thing. Today, you are talking about Bachwezi and these other groups. Remember, they are Luo. Remember, there are these, I don't know what, but Mbuzi and many others. If each one of them formed a military wing and came to struggle in this government, we are heading for a danger. Just to, Sarah was saying that there must be a big problem with the commander-in-chief. I think he enjoys.
Enjoys this?
He enjoys this.
Vulgarization?
Yeah, I have had, for me, I take the president very serious when he's saying his thing. He explained to us one time why he named his son Muhozi. I didn't know me, I'm not a Munyakori. But he explained to us what he...
we are becoming endangered species.
Yes. He explained...
Not a Mnyankore.
Me, I'm not a Mnyankore. He explained to us what it means to hoza. Somebody who will fight, who will revenge for me.
On his behalf.
Who will revenge
Avenger.
or avenge
The
on
Avenger.
his behalf. And I don't take that very lightly when you see what the man is doing. He has started the avenging and they are preparing him. When you see a man training his dog with a spear, you know they are going to hunt. When you see a man training his dog with a gun, a lethal gun, you know they are going to fight. When you see a man training his dog with explosives, they are going for war. And therefore, when you try to see this, and the president is doing nothing, Sarah, I can tell you for a fact, President Museveni is a man of details. He has a lot of intelligence,
we need
which
to
he
wind up,
listens
Robert.
to. He knows what is happening, and that is not doing anything. He's happy with it.
So, Sarah, I need to move. Joseph, you wanted to say something before I come to Sarah. But also, just as you come in, there is growing concern, of course, about this bill. Looking at the timing, we're a few months away from general elections, and the concern from dissenting voices, especially from the opposition. I think much of the commentaries and concerns you will hear everywhere as well. This bill and the proposed amendments are primarily targeting dissenting voices, likely from the opposition. So I'd also like to hear your thoughts about that, Joseph.
Yes, and I think, and sadly, it's extremely diversionary and in a very terrible spirit. And like I was saying much earlier, the timing itself is extraordinary, and it's really shocking that we are in the evenings of elections, and from even our own sides, from the democratic opposition, possibly we are not cohesively loud enough. I know the voices are being thrown. I think we need to be louder, but we need to be much more organized loud. We need to be able to embrace concepts and contexts, whether it's protest sports or whatever else it is, that we pick to make sure that we pump using your fantastic media networks to reach out to the citizenry. Because I think in any case, I'm not even sure whether citizens know what's going on, and that's why I was trying to taunt this business of 90% of Buganda, for argument's sake, or perhaps 95% of DP, would have been in prison as a result of this, and in military prison in Ochieno administration. If these kind of provisions, as suggested, were part of our legislation, and it was the spirit of the government of the time. But Sarah, although Dr. Ojambo was referred, Sarah said her concern were not CDF, rather were not that Muhozi, the Avenger, and sometimes I wonder, Avenger, Museveni was avenging for who? Museveni is one of these guys, and speaks UPC with the absolute authority. Museveni is one of the few people in this country who've had massive privilege in this country, massive opportunities, massive exceptional privilege and opportunities granted by the beauty of this country and by the gods of this country and by the political and national leadership of this country, including fantastically decent, God-given spirit of special treatment by elders like Mzee Boniface Byanyima at difficult times. What is it that made Museveni so angry to seek to want to revenge, to avenge? What exactly is it? Maybe Ugandans need to be considering this. So I find it interesting. But okay, his son, we get terribly worried. In fact, I'm terribly worried for the young man. He's extraordinary. I'm a diplomat, you know. You know that. I'm a diplomat, and I'm a seasoned diplomat. Genuinely, as is being discussed, it is actually genuinely shocking that a military officer, a senior military officer, let alone a CDF of any nation state, by the way, would speak the language of young Mr. Muhoozi, anyway, particularly on the South African continent, and get away with it. Meaning, perhaps, I really, really hope the rest of the world is watching. And for me who's seen Rwanda, and for me who's seen Congo, and for me who's seen particularly Zimbabwe, at massive global conflict, and seen Angola, and for me who's even seen contemporary South Africa, I find it extraordinary that these kind of mentions are done, and it's almost like business as usual, including taunting delegations from major diplomatic missions, including the EU. So I worry for the young man. But you know what? I also worry for the father. But the most important worry is for me, we the citizen. Because if it is the case that Comrade Museveni now has got absolute incapacity to deal with his son, and if it's the case that Mr. Museveni now has got absolute, almost sufficiently big incapacity to recognize what's going on and to see what's going on, and so therefore to deal with what's going on, then no. We must be afraid, Juliet. As a country, we must be afraid. If this is our leader, the commander-in-chief, and it's at this level, this country must be afraid. Why? After 40 years. Why? A group that came in after war. Why? Africa, the state in which we are. And why? This young nation state. And why? This excessively militarized country. You know what? You were saying, Machel, and I'll conclude. You're saying, Machel, talk about
Well, I have time.
Yes, please. You're well.
And
You're
I'll give you
well.
my, I'll give you my 1
Certainly.
minute. The military element of Parliament. I am privileged, guys.
The deployments.
Yeah, the deployments. I'm privileged that I was here in the 80s, throughout 1980s when Endera was in the bush. You walk into Parliament, not a police officer would stop you. You walk into the National Assembly, not a police officer would stop you. And so this is where we are. What am I saying? That at a petrol station, at a local supermarket, people are armed. So therefore, fellow citizens, to reach a stage in which there is a semblance or a spark of conflict, a military conflict in this country, no, this country would have bloodbath, terrible. And for me, as UPC, as the custodians, of our national independence, it concerns me. So no, we the citizens, we must be the most worried. And so therefore, we the people must take this thing much, much more serious. So it's not about really this legislation. The fact that this guy is even there, bring it back to where it is, and to treat it as it is, and to be washed by the context and content of the language of the son of Mr. Museveni. We should all be much worried.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Major Awich, let's give you time. Yeah.
I guess this time is not on our side. I will make bullet points. In the broader scheme of things about the bill before Parliament, I have not looked at it. I don't know whether Sarah saw it. I hope there was a provision, or there is a provision, of appellate procedure.
Yes,
There is.
Because Amama had put the appeal by way of a regulation. And the court had said that you can't make appeal by regulation. Appeal should be a creation of
The Principal Act.
Principal Act. So if it is there, maybe that could also go a long way for the safeguards, in that an aggrieved party in the rulings in the military courts will have his way through upstairs. to the merger with the civilian courts. So if that provision is captured, and then that would be a safeguards for the bigger worry of military courts doing injustice. So if it is there, and that's fine. Sarah mentioned about going for protest vote. I just want to appeal to the viewers that as a family, as Uganda, even in a family of even 2 children, mother, father, and 2 children, there are contradictions. So these are normal contradictions in society that we shall once resolve it. They are not so major, they are minor. We shall move forward. So look at the bigger schemes that NRM is doing, the welfare of people. I'm told now the life expectancy has increased to 67.
What is your contribution to that?
So please don't go for protest vote. Stay with us. Now, the other thing I wanted to say about why the Karamojong MPs have supported the bill at the committee stage, and I'm sure they'll support that provision at a later thing. And that is why I warned you guys the other time, especially Doctor, that you seem not to know the gravity, the dynamics, and the scope of this cattle rustling. The members know it. Remember, we are talking of cattle rustling as inter. That is Karamoja and Teso, Karamoja Chole. But there's intra, where Pokot raid, Bokora raid, Pian raid, Matheniku, and the guys die in big numbers. So they want a stop at that. So their cry is, what justice system can do this? If you had told them that the chief magistrates could do it, they would say you have saved us. But in their experience, chief magistrate won't. So that is, don't be surprised why the Karamojong MPs support that. Because I told you I went with Minister Umonyi Jok, and we found in a small place like a football pitch where 2 communities had collided in the raid. This one coming to raid the other one. Bokora and Matheniko. Nearly 600 bodies in a small place. No withdraw, nothing. You fight to death. So I am not surprised that Karamojong MPs support this. And they support it not even because of inter-raid between Karamojong raiding and Choli. No, Karamojong raiding themselves alone is dangerous enough. So don't be surprised by that support by the Karamojong themselves, because they want a remedy. About the European Union, I'm the Director for External Affairs, and I rub shoulders with these people nearly on a daily basis, either for meetings like we recently had, all of them at the movement secretariat, all of them. And we discussed and we are happy. We know a way forward. In fact, for us, we even advise them that from here, go and meet our brothers. Me and Secretary General, we also went to the British High Commissioner. I think you saw the photo somewhere. Yes. And we also told the High Commissioner that now that you have talked to us, go and talk to our brothers in NUP and all that. We want a good governing system. We even urge them to tell them to join IPOD, because that is one of the forums that we could discuss. So, even with the comment of the CDF, don't be worried. Our relationship are good, and we shall continue to be good.
So is it
with our
against you guys?
Which, if I may ask, as a director within the NRM, which makes you a member of NEC and SEC, a de facto member of NEC and SEC, do you think, and of course I hope that you are aware that as a ruling party, you are accountable for the regime conduct, including the conduct of the CDF. When the future generation is aggregating your crimes as a regime, there will be crimes of the NRM party in power. So, do you think that the CDF understands that we are in a multi-party dispensation? That's my first question. And then following that, do you ever raise questions regarding the appalling conduct of the CDF in your hierarchy of meetings as a party?
2 questions, and I will answer straight. One, like he had said, at a level of a general, general of the army, you are exposed to strategic thinking. So knowing that we're in a multi-party system, the CDF should know, and I believe he knows. The general is expected to know even international relations.
Is that strategic
So
thinker?
so he knows it. Two, on your question two, so I'm answering the question one in the affirmative,
yes.
that he knows we're in a multi-party. Question two, about whether or not we have discussed, it has not yet come to as a matter for discussion. So,
But who is supposed to escalate it?
Straight again to your answer, it has not come.
So could we request you then, because for us we don't have access to power, that you rear a table? These matters.
You have requested, so.
Yeah.
Now,
Thank you. Yes, yeah. Let's finish.
So I just wanted to say that again, as you said that as a party we are accountable for the action. True, we are the ones with the mandate. The social contract is between the party and the people, and therefore the party forms government.
Yeah.
So whatever happens in government, the misdeeds and all that,
You
whether people don't have salt or sugar, or whether the health systems are bad,
or whether you want to take the head of Human Rights Commission in a basement.
we definitely, as a party, we are because we are the ones who have the people have elected us on the strength of our mandate. In other words, we promise in our manifesto that we shall do this,
And that,
this.
yes.
Yeah.
Did you also include that you will take people in the basement in your manifesto?
Of course, you are being sarcastic, not, but you know, the component that you are talking about is that in the manifesto there's a component of justice and other sector, where we first of all promise justice. We even promise to recruit judges, which we have recruited. We promise to increase salary of judicial officers, which we did. We even promised to construct courts and welfare of judicial officers, we did. And we promised to rule of law. So without talking about basement, that is the component, the thematic concern where our manifesto talks about justice.
Thank you. And if you could also just conclude and then we move.
No, I want to conclude by something not in this debate. I want to conclude maybe by way of a party that I've been in Kenya. I was with the Secretary General in Kenya at the invitation of the UDA, the ruling party in Kenya. And I was happy with what happened because we made the relationship between the people of Uganda and the people of Kenya very healthy.
The ruling parties.
Yes.
Not the people.
No.
Yes. So for us, we believe that the party are the ones with the people. And that's why they sign social contract. We have structures up to party membership, a village member of the party. So if we are to unite Uganda and Burundi, the parties are the best people to do that. The executive do executive duties. They actually follow their public service thing. So we, especially neighboring countries, so we think we did that. And I can assure you, when we were at the office of the governor, the Secretary General inspected the mountain as a guard of honor by police of Kenya, and the Secretary General inspected. I normally don't shed tears, even if you cut my leg. When you cut my leg, my head works like a computer, how to deal with it. But when I'm happy, I shed tears of happiness. I really shedded tears of happiness. I just couldn't imagine that in my little way, we can make harmony, make two countries happy. And I just, for a split of a second, I said, suppose this was the opposite. Like say war, how would we be? Therefore, as a party, and which we have direct contact with the people up to the grassroots, I'm committed to ensure that we unite our people. And to this effect, I've done with South Sudan, I've done with Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, I'm only left with DRC. It is DRC that I have not had touch with the ruling party, and therefore have not made a way for bringing the people. But otherwise, I bring you greetings from Kenya. We are very happy with Kenya.
Thank you.
Does DRC also have a ruling party?
They had a multi-party election, and therefore it's presumed it says Kedi is only having a party.
Joseph.
I am delighted for Comrade Awich. He made a Kenyan trip. He shared with us as good friends. We were friendly on this panel. But the idea that the people of Uganda have got a formal relationship with the Kenyan ruling party, I reject, because I don't really have anything. I don't know ideologically what Ruto's political organization represents, and it's not completely inconsistent with the values of Uganda People's Congress. It's absolutely inconsistent with the values
So
of...
I don't always interrupt. The ideology of the ruling part of Kenya, for once, we were very happy this election. Kenya's election has always been on tribal. But this time, it was an issue, more or less like a caste issue that hustlers. Hustlers. You know, it's not Kikuyu, Luo, or what. They had a philosophy that as long as you're a Kenyan hustlers, you are together. So that is the ideology.
Okay,
so as opposed to a tribal sentiment, we think that is progressive.
Comrade Awich is saying that a slogan is an ideology. No, that was merely...
No, a slogan implies...
No, that was merely...
Of course, I can't go into detail.
No, but fair enough, Comrade Awich. But no, it would be completely inconsistent with the values of Uganda People's Congress. I know it's absolutely inconsistent with the values and spirit of the East African community. What Ruto and sometimes his father figure in NRA has been doing has been to consistently undermine the values and aspirations of the East African community. Again, I speak as a representative, in fact, as a leader of a political party at the founding of the big thinking for the East African community, in fact, the Organization of African Unity. But that's fine. I just want to say this, that linking this proposed legislation with Karamoja is, to me, is a continuation of an insult, because I argued it on this program, that one, it is true that we've had rustling problems in Karamoja, but I want to tell you that officially in 1984-85, UPC government used a very specific approach to resolve the matters of cattle rustling in Karamoja, and that was using community leaders led by chiefs. And I think one case is mixed up in my case where one of the current female members of parliament, I think for Moroto or Kotido, I think, the father was actually the county chief who effectively helped enable this thing. These things begin again when rule of law breaks down, including when NRA bandits joined with the DPs and the Okellos and then restarted war and then sold arms to the Karamojong people. But granted, whatever happens, to justify that because we beat up the Karamojong people by force and brutally beat them up, and because our judicial system has not been able to address this very particular issue, even with the police at the front and backed by the army, and so therefore we are justifying that this thing goes to work on the Karamojong, is actually an insult to Ugandans. So how a wrestling process that resolves a matter somewhere in Kotido should be applied to an average citizen in Nagongera, I just have no clue. So I think that is wrong, and it would be an insult to people of Karamoja. The people in Karamoja need jobs. The people in Karamoja need their land to be left by Balalo, and many of these are people who are buying and taking their cattle. The people in Karamoja need education. The people in Karamoja need public health. The people in Karamoja need to be able to control their gold. The people of Karamoja need to be able to be provided with reasonable security. That is what they want, and they want leadership from their communities and national communities, not an insult which is being pushed by NRA to use it as an excuse to brutalize people like the man in which they brutalized Besige and the kind of thing that is happening from Kawempe and the missing Ugandans, and justify that so that we forget that, oh, it worked in Karamoja. Yes, we can use that system across the country.
Thank you, Joseph. Sarah?
Well, two things. One is that the NRM and the UDA relationship, they have a lot in common. One is that they both parties wear yellow as their main color. Two is that both parties are conducting enforced disappearances on their citizens. And Ruto has exceeded beyond citizens. He causes enforced disappearances of foreigners, including our own Besige and Obed, including attempted abduction of Maria, a prominent activist from Tanzania, and the Taiwan nationals and others. So they have a lot in common. And we hope that maybe this new marriage, you can reflect on your excesses when you still have the mandate to rule your countries. On the issue of the bill, I want to appeal to the people. We have been addressing policy decision makers here, and I want to direct the appeal to the viewers out there. Send a text message to your MP. Tell them one sentence: no return of civilian trials in military courts. Tell them we shall watch how they vote. And like I said earlier in my submission, I'm very serious about the protest vote. So as citizens of Uganda, I'm calling you out. We vote out all these MPs that will vote for draconian kangaroo trials of civilians in the military courts. We also go further and check the excesses of NRM through a protest vote and vote them out of power. Those are my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Robert, just very quickly.
Yeah, you see, this long discussion can only come to an end when you clean the head. Because you see, when a river is getting dirty, you have to know where the dirt is coming from. It is from the higher side of the river. So you cannot sit down here cleaning and yet the dirt is being sent from up there. I think the leadership of Uganda seems to be either tired. If they are not tired, they have now reached a break-even point in economics, where now the graph, instead of going up, it is sloping down very quickly,
Diminishing.
or the law of diminishing return in the same economics. So I really feel that we cannot proceed like this. I think it is dangerous to our children. When these military officers are implementing these bad laws that later they pass, you will not see children of military officers being allayed there. It is children of peasants, people who don't ghetto, kids who don't have anything. Sometimes they don't know anything. In a country where people now are educated, people have PhDs, people have master's degree, how can somebody say that a red beret is a military attire when the military attire is known very well with the crown?
But they've added black shoes.
Black shoes with the long soles.
Hey, this
They are
Seriously?
going to be picking
the
us.
boots, the designer shoes for men.
I've got fantastic
Yeah,
boots, so
These days
I
I'm
shouldn't be putting on.
Yeah, you'll be in trouble.
These days I'm worried when
And the Kaunda suits.
these days
And
I'm
counter suits.
yes. These days I'm worried when these security officers are checking my car. In fact, I want to get a system where I can lock my car
Yes.
and nobody can open my boot until I allow.
Yeah.
Because somebody can open your boot as if he's checking and he puts AK-47 there. And the minute they will just call that there is a car, black car, with AK-47. And you will find me tomorrow in that bogus court of theirs. Of course, when I reach there, I will
In the basement.
I will remain very
Basement court.
silent.
Basement court.
So for me, what I'm saying, I want to add on what Sarah has said. I think this is the time that Ugandans should show that they have power, and their power should be in their vote. This business of people deceiving you with the small money of PDM, then some small things, you find the president sleeping in a district for a whole week every day, spending 2.5 billion to explain about 1 billion which they brought in the district. In the whole district, they brought each parish was given small money. Then the president is spending 2.5 billion to explain how you are going to use that little money. Really, it is a mockery on the people. So I want to urge people that go out there and let's watch. The good thing these days, we have these plenaries on TV. Let's watch these MPs speak their broken English and later go and vote badly. When they come back in January, let's send all of them home so that they know
Protest
that working
towards
against people is not
As
a good
consequences.
thing. Whether NRM or not NRM, so long as they are voting against the people. Because for me, I believe court martial is a bad thing, because the Supreme Court recommended a disciplinary committee. If the army has a disciplinary committee to deal with their service offenses there, I have no problem. But bringing a court, above all, a court which is going to torment civilians, is a bad thing. So if MPs and their speaker collude and bring this to the people of Uganda, I normally don't go early to vote. I'll go very early at 6 and I'll make sure I mobilize 10 people to vote with me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ojambo, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, and retired Major Awich Pollar for your contributions and submissions to this discussion, a very topical conversation, of course, on the UPDF Parliament versus the People, the amendment debate. My name is Judith Atim. I'm your host, and thank you very much to you, our viewers. We are, because of you, the Citizens Chat Show returns next week, same time. But just so you know, like we talked about, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, this conversation on the UPDF amendment bill is not the last. I think we are yet to have more of this on this show. So do stay tuned for whatever developments will be unfolding out there. We shall definitely be having our insights and also contributing to this critical discourse. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week, same time. Until then.